Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello, I'm Zina Shevchik. Welcome to Parenting in the 21st Century. We have with us today Jill Rifkin, an independent college counselor and head of college options. She's here with us today to discuss the college search and application process and parents' role in that process. Thank you very much for coming today, Jill.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
Why don't you begin by telling us something about yourself, your background, your experience, and about your business, College Options?
Sure. I started College Options 14 years ago, and I'm proud to say that I'm at the moment in the process of counseling my 415th student, which I never would have believed all those years ago. I visited at this point, before I even opened, I visited 200 colleges. And since then, I visited a total of about 380 in 29 states. And I began to revisit the ones that I use often about 2 years ago. It's a process that never ends. And when I'm at these schools, I've interviewed literally thousands of students and, of course, many admissions counselors, and it's an integral part of my work.
And would you tell us exactly what you do for students and parents?
Sure. Well, you mean describe the process.
Right. How you help people.
They come to me, usually almost always through personal recommendation, and the parents and the students come. I interview them for about 3 hours. It's very comprehensive. I ask all kinds of questions. Obviously, I need to know the difficulty of their course load, the courses they've taken, how well they've done in those courses, their extracurricular activities. But all of that you can plug into a computer. People don't need me just for that. I go way beyond. I'm trying to fit the personality of the student with the culture of the college. I'll be asking questions like the kind of people they're comfortable with, the kind of people they're not comfortable with, academic situations where they thrived and where they haven't. Perhaps I'll ask about their political views. What's important to them? Does making a ton of money mean a great deal to them in the future? Does changing the world for the better mean a great deal? That's about an hour and a half, all those questions. I get to know them pretty well. And for the other hour and a half, we go over many of the attributes of colleges that distinguish one from another. What's it like? Everybody wants to be near Boston. Do they realize, which is fine, but do they realize that if you're in or near a big city, it may reduce the sense of community on campus? Do they want most social life on or off campus? Those are just some of the many factors. How far from home do they want to be? A lot of them don't want to be that far, but the downside is it tends to be more difficult to get into schools if you're very close to them, especially the more competitive ones, because schools like geographic diversity. Those are just some of the factors we consider. I've probably got a list of about 30 that we go over with every client.
And after this, what sounds to me like a very rigorous personal assessment.
Which I try to make fun, by the way.
Yeah, I would imagine that it could be very deadly for some students to have to think about all that.
They find it fun.
Do they? That's good.
I'm sure it is.
That's good.
I'll stop, I listen intently, and some of them might, gee, I never thought of that. And they don't always have answers, to how they feel about each of these attributes, but that's a perfect opportunity to begin to teach.
Right, that's exactly what it sounds like, a teaching moment here.
And parents, my favorite question, I just love it, is what makes your child special? Because the kids get embarrassed by that one. And, because every child is so much more than their grades and their SATs and their list of activities. That's maybe 40% of what makes each kid unique. And I get such wonderful answers from the parents up here. Things like, he really cares about his younger brothers and sisters and takes good care of them. Or, oh, so many things. Care of a handicapped child, enthusiasm for life, joie de vivre. So many factors come out that have nothing to do with all those lists that schools look at. And I consider those critical in finding an appropriate school.
It sounds like parents can help you assess the child and the child's needs as well.
Absolutely.
Or personality and needs.
Personality, absolutely.
Do you interview them separately? Do you interview student parents
but
separately?
I'm in constant contact with both. And there is a separate part of each interview where I interview students alone and parents alone, always.
So it sounds like self-assessment is the beginning of the college search.
That's absolutely
process.
accurate. It doesn't start with the colleges. It starts with a very careful self-assessment of personality, of values, of possibly career interest, but not everybody has formed career interest at that point. But some people do.
How involved do you think parents should be in this college search and application process?
Well, they have to be sensitive to this. It marks the beginning. This college search, I feel, marks the beginning of a teen search for independence, which they must assume to become an independent and confident adult. It's a very fine line. Parents need to be supportive, but not overbearing. It's a very tough balance. But may I just go back
Absolutely.
to what we were saying before
Absolutely.
about what I do? You get the interview. The next session is almost as long. They get a very detailed and personalized description of perhaps 14 or 15 schools that I think are appropriate. They include safety schools, target schools, and reach schools. Safety schools, they're probably going to get in unless they shoot the dean or something. Target schools, the SATs and the grade point average of the students are approximately comparable to those of the students at the school that they're considering. And for reach schools, their GPA and SATs tend to be lower. You can find that out in any college guidebook, which parents need to get. So that's the first step in the students beginning to take over the process, because they are given a few more schools than I want them to start with, and I want them to say, gee, school X sounds a little bit better than school Y, and let's keep that in the list. And they end up at the end of the second session with a list of about 10 schools to visit of varying degrees of difficulty. The next session is critical. How to visit a school. The trouble is tour guides tend to be the happy, peppy people on campus who love everything. I always tell everyone my kids were tour guides, and I wouldn't trust them at all, because they like their schools too much. Uh-huh. You got to talk to some Oscar the Grouches, and they will be given a large number of questions to ask, potential questions, and they circle the ones that mean something to them. If they're interested in a particular activity or academic subject, we tailor special questions just for them that they may need to ask professors or coaches. But too many kids and parents simply take the tour and go to the information session offered by the college. That's not enough. You've got to delve much further to get the feel of the school. Otherwise, they sound too much like one another. They get a mock interview if the schools have interviews. And the next session is general tips on getting in, although that would be done throughout in any case. One suggestion is take the ACT as well as the SAT in junior year, and then when they're seniors, whichever one they do better on is the one that they should study for. Okay. That's something new in the last few years, that's perfectly acceptable to colleges. The summer between junior and senior years, the second school is out, we start with essays. They are extremely important, much more so than the interview. And it's a wonderful time for the student to show who they are. And the colleges really want to know that. And they're difficult. And they take a lot of work. In a million years, I won't write a student's essay for them, but I'll send them back 4 times so the essay is right. It's got to be the best piece of work they can do. And they work hard on them.
And do you find that that's the most difficult part for the students usually, is actually writing the essay?
Yes, because they're trying to do their schoolwork at the same time. Sure, I try to get them to do as much as I can over the summer, but there's always last-minute things.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's balancing all of the things. Parents can help there. One thing that a parent can do, it seems to me, without overstepping bounds, is act as a secretary. For example, they can buy a calendar and put on that calendar the due dates for financial aid of a particular school, the due dates for the application, put on the calendar when the interview is, perhaps help the student make a list of all the essay questions that they need to write, and see when you can just tweak one essay just a little bit and answer a second college. That's a miracle from heaven.
Right.
It happens to use the
change.
same one, absolutely. It's so much easier than starting from scratch. But it still has to be perfectly done. Parents, just seeing what you have to do, and kids are notoriously not particularly good at organization, right. And parents, after all these years, tend to be better. That's a perfect use of a parent's time.
That's a very good suggestion.
But there are many things that parents can do.
Just taking kids to the schools if they want, to visit is a huge, a huge effort because
absolutely.
Like I had twins, and we were doing it at the same. They're very different, and so we spent most of their the second half of their junior year and that summer between junior and senior year visiting colleges, and it was a big effort. Even though we stayed in the Northeast and Middle Atlantic, it was a very big effort. So,
some tips on the visits that parents can do. This is the one time I think parents can take the lead in just this one respect. Kids are going to have a tough time figuring out how long it takes to get from one school to another. The scheduling, that's the one time a parent can contact a school and say, I'd like to be there on Tuesday, November 1st at 3 o'clock. That's just a little bit too complicated for kids with the hotels and everything in between. That's one thing that parents can do. Other than that, hands off. All contacts with colleges, other than that, should be done by students. Because they don't want what they call helicopter parents hovering over the kids, hovering over the admissions. Is that not an attractive?
Is that likely to negatively impact a child's chance?
It certainly could. Yes, it certainly can have a negative impact if it's to the extreme, but colleges are used to it. And one would like to think they don't totally penalize a student for an over-involved parent. It's all done usually with love.
Do you think that tendency has that increased, the parents trying to get overly involved?
Yes. There's no question.
And what do you think that's the result of? Is it because it's a more competitive situation now, getting into colleges, or it's more important?
I think parents worry too much that it's a reflection on where their student, where their child gets in is too much a reflection of their parenting, the child's worth. None of this has anything to do with that.
Status symbol?
But also parents are used to hovering more than they used to be able to because of the technology. Cell phones and emailing and all of that. They're used to, they've been able to be, because of technology, more involved in their child's life than parents used to be able to do.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that, and I think that's true. I have two of my daughters are in college now, and I think that is true about the cell phones and the emails. Absolutely, because I can communicate with them in a non-interfering way by email in a way that I was never able to communicate with my parents when I was in college.
Absolutely true.
So that's a good point. What's the most difficult part of the process for parents? Is it staying back? Is it watching and just letting things happen?
I would say a pretty difficult, yes, but specifically a difficult part is every parent in the world wants the best for their children. There's so much love over all these years. You want things to be wonderful, but you've got to let your child, and you can help with that, make an accurate assessment of their interests, make sure it's your interests, the child's interests and not yours. That's one thing. Just as an anecdote, a parent once broke my heart. Couple of things. A child who looked so defeated, he was so depressed, you could just tell. This was an immigrant parent who desperately wanted his child to be a doctor, and there was no way that anything else was going to work in this family. I mean, sometimes I know when I'm defeated, I couldn't do anything. But when I asked him about his interests, I always watched their faces to see if there's congruence between what they say and their feelings. And his whole face brightened up when he started talking about following the stock market. But that wasn't going to be allowed in that family. So you have to take a note of their interests, make sure they're not yours, and take a note of their personality. For example, a shy and insecure child, even if it's the parent's alma mater, may not be particularly happy or at Monster U, where you need to be assertive to get attention from professors at least freshman year. A child who's not particularly socially skilled might be miserable at a very preppy school, no matter how many people in the family went to it. A social butterfly is going to die at a single-sex school, even though the parent may want it to tame the child down, but that doesn't. But somebody who couldn't care less what they look like might be unhappy at some of these southern schools where they dress up in heels for football games. The girls do anyway. A computer geek is going to be in heaven, where he may have felt so out of place in high school, at a school where there's a million computer geeks and they can play video games and do whatever the computer people do till 4 o'clock in the morning. And I don't even know what they do, but they know what they do.
Right.
I've got in my brochure, I wrote it before I even opened, and I've tried to have it as my guiding principle. You're not a chameleon. You shouldn't have to change your learning style, code of values, or manner of dress, thought, or behavior to fit into a college. And I just think that guides my counseling, and I would like it to guide parents too.
So to be honest about who they're and what they're
where they're going to thrive.
Right. Right. I do.
It may not be. Typically, if a student gets into a variety of schools, I may encourage him to go to the most competitive if it fits. But some kids wither under competition, and others don't. Others are energized by it. You have to know your child.
Right. So that's the taking stock and being realistic and honest about a child's personality and talents. And I think that academics, I don't mean they're of course they're very important when you're choosing a school, but I have to say with my two children it was more choosing where they wanted to live, who they wanted to be with, and that allowed them to be comfortable enough to thrive in the academic world.
You were a wise parent.
But
because if they're miserable, if they're a square peg in a round hole, they're probably not going to do well academically either.
Right.
It all feeds on one another. A child is a whole, and you have to look at all of those parts when you're investigating schools to make sure that they fit in. Asking questions is critical.
So I have to say that with me, because I'm a librarian and I'm in a library, a large portion of my time, I did a lot of, I looked at all the guides that we have, the college guides, and I wonder.
Perfect place to start.
Is that, that's what I wanted to
absolutely
ask.
where I love to start. Some of them are excellent.
Do you have anything?
Princeton Review's Guide to the Best 300 and something Schools is superb. Fisk is wonderful. A guide for students who may not be as academically, who may not be academic superstars. Colleges That Changed Lives is a wonderful book. There's so many out there that are good.
And I think that my little experience with it was that they each had something different to offer, each of the books.
That's true.
So that I recommended, I brought home books, a whole array of books, and just kind of left them on the living room coffee table because I didn't, and I tried really hard. I have to say that I tried really hard not to be involved, but it was very, very, very hard.
It's terribly hard. I'm a parent too. One of my first child, I love this story. My first child was just as interested as I was in this process. She's a counselor herself now.
Oh.
She's a social worker.
Right.
Anyway, but
That's
the
great.
same kind of thing. And the other one, who's now a lawyer, Mom, why do I have to visit any schools? As long as it's not the Citadel, I'll be fine. I figured if I can cope with her, I can cope with anybody. But when I'd leave the books in her room and dust would collect around them, but eventually she began to look at them. And it was very hard to step back. And then it was like divine revenge because she loved her college so much that she became a tour guide, and then the admissions office hired her one summer to do interviews. I thought it was like divine revenge. It was very funny. That
really is.
College, and so many of my kids, I hear from them. I send them questionnaires later. Kids are calling me all the time. Telling me that they're happy, and I've got the best job in the world.
It sounds like it must be very fulfilling.
It's joyful when they're happy. And a shy kid went to St. Michael's, a big favorite of mine, and all of a sudden she sounds so sure of herself. And what a joy for me,
really,
and a joy for her. She's going to graduate doing anything she wants to do.
Do you think the internet has been helpful, or in its, the information that it provides? Do you think?
Yes, it's also the way kids get information. Maybe not the way we do, but they do.
Right. I'm just wondering if there's a wrong way to use the internet for this kind of information, or do colleges put out a lot of marketing that's not?
Yes, they certainly do, and they also send it. That's why I consider it critical to visit the schools. Don't wait until you get in. Number one, visiting is seen as evidence of interest, and it'll help you get in. And even if they don't have interviews, it tends to matter.
Right.
But I recommend planning questions in advance of that you've got to find out. You're not going to get honest answers to this in the school literature. Is the school strong in your area of interest? Every college is going to say every subject is terrific. The kids will tell you. What percentage of the courses can you get into?
Yeah.
That's critical, because if you can't get into tons of your courses, you may graduate a year late. That
Or
costs
wind
a
up
fortune.
taking courses when
You
there's
don't
all these
want.
general education
Absolutely.
courses. That is a very good
The
point.
importance of Greek life. Does it dominate schools? What about the drinking and drug scene? You don't think the colleges are going to tell you honest answers about that? Of course they're not.
So the visit is where you can talk to the students.
Absolutely. They are essential. Often I recommend, if the student can go around with the parents, but you've got to go beyond the tour. Or at least I recommend that you do. But if the student wants, the parents can do their own tour and their own questioning of students, and then you meet later. And I caution parents, when they get back together with the student, let the student, because parents are quite influential, let the student tell the parent their opinions about the school before the parent expresses theirs.
I'm laughing
I was guilty of that.
Yeah, that's hard.
I wouldn't be now.
Yeah.
That's very hard. But that's a good thing to do. It's important to take notes on these schools. You're going to forget which is which after a while. And also they're useful in interviews and in the supplements that the kids now have to write. Often they have to answer the question, why do you want to go to XYZ school, and what is it about it that appeals to you? You need specifics for that. So parents and students alike, when they're visiting schools, should look for things that scream the kid's name, that this is just perfect for that kid. Details. Parents can help with that.
Right. Yeah.
Look at bulletin boards. If I had to assess a college in 5 minutes, I'd look at bulletin boards.
Bulletin boards you mean in like the student union?
Everywhere.
Or everywhere on the campus?
The opportunities in a field of interest in an academic building, bulletin boards in the student union or the cafeteria, it's a perfect way to assess the social life.
Right. What students do in their spare
Absolutely.
time, and they do have a lot of spare time.
They do.
Sometimes. So that's a good point, because that will tell you something about how what the culture is on the campus and what is available and what the kids are interested in. That's great. Let's see. Are there any, I guess maybe people in our audience, there might be quite a few who would be interested in, if you had a student who just wasn't willing to begin the process, is there anything a parent can do, and what's the latest that people can start to search? What would you suggest if you have a student who just is not willing to start the college search process? Does that mean something, and is there anything the parent can do?
Well, maybe recognize and talk about the fear that may underlie this. This is a difficult thing to do. They're separating from everything they ever knew. Maybe try to address the feelings underneath and sympathize, empathize. This is not an easy thing to do. Would you like, how about if we just visited a few schools without taking an interview so you can get an idea? That's one thing I'd suggest. I don't recommend starting this process senior year. Junior year is much better. And if you spread it out, it's so much easier, because you're not trying to visit schools senior year when you have all those essays to write, plus very difficult schoolwork before Christmas vacation of senior year. That's a bad time to be writing all of the essays and visiting schools.
Yes, that
But
was
I would
one-
address the feelings underneath in answer to
fears.
it's scary.
Yeah.
And some people, some students, there's no question, may not want to go to college. Many of them may want to, there are a million other things to do, and some of them may want to take a year off, an option that's absolutely acceptable in Europe. I gather the princes of England both did it. It's perfectly normal there. Maybe they need an internship for a year, or a paid job, or whatever.
Just more time.
I've
maybe
seen
to
a
think.
handful of my students grow up from that, and then do beautifully at school. Absolutely beautifully.
Well, that's encouraging.
You
I
don't
think,
have
for
to,
parents.
it's not lockstep anymore the way it used to be. You don't have to. I listened before I directed. Besides, anytime you direct, they're going to do the, if they're normal, healthy, red-blooded American kids, they're going to do exactly the opposite. If you push too much, and if every minute of every day is spent discussing colleges and there's no safe place to be, you've lost your kid.
That is excellent.
You've lost
advice.
your impact.
Right, influence, right.
Not
gonna
easy.
listen. They're not going to listen, yes.
It's the hardest job in the world, being a parent.
It is, and parenting, you have to evolve. You're learning. As they're changing, you have to change as well. And this is just one more process for both student and parent to get used to and learn. And you've been terrific in offering fantastic advice.
Can I give you one more
Absolutely.
thing to talk about?
Absolutely.
Things that you can do in advance of the college process. One of them, children model what parents do. Read. Have all sorts of things to read in the house. This is from when kids are younger. Make trips to the library and bookstores a part of your life. If they see you reading, you've got at least a fighting chance of counteracting the influence of hours and hours on those computers and the video games. It helps. Take them on, if there's anything they express interest in, be it extracurricular or academic, do something about it. My own daughter, who expressed an interest in women's rights, and I looked it up. There's a women's rights museum in Seneca Falls, in the Finger Lakes area. She was fascinated. The whole family went on that trip. It was fascinating. She minored in women's studies at college and is now a lawyer. I mean, all of this stuff
Connects.
And so you encourage the development of interests, but not so that the rest of the family falls apart. I mean, it can get completely out of hand. And besides, colleges would prefer to see expertise and leadership in just a few areas, not in, you don't have to be involved in 8 of them. You can't. Otherwise, it's just too much. Anyway, that's some of what you can do ahead of time. But you want them to, your key job, you want to be their booster. You want to be their, of all the people, it's a stressful process, and you want to show them every day of their lives that you love them and admire them, and that where they get into college is not a reflection of who they are, and that you will love them no matter what. Absolutely unconditional love no matter what. That's so important. There's so much pressure from some parents, and it breaks my heart when I see that.
So you are...
Not often.
Right.
Most of the parents are terrific around here.
But it's a good lesson for people to understand that
Yeah.
it shouldn't be a deal breaker in any case in a family about college choice or college search or application
Absolutely.
process. Put it in perspective. Thank you very much for being with
You're
us
welcome.
today, Jill Rifkin.
It was a pleasure.
You've been a real eye-opener here. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Thank you for being with us in Parenting in the 21st Century.